Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Down with D&D. My name is Shawn Merwin, and I am here to talk D&D with all of you and my friend, Teos Abadia. Hey, Teos.
Hey, how's it going?
I am awake, and I'm checking my pulse. Yep, we're still here.
Fantastic. Yeah. This morning I got up and I threw the bones by the ocean side and prayed, as we all should, to, Keranos, the god of storms. And I think it's going to be great today. It's going to be clear skies for us.
Yeah, I splashed a little wine on. Actually spilled it, but
it's a ritual nonetheless.
It's pretty much the same thing anymore. So today we are going to continue our look at the Mythic Odysseys of Theros book, covering hopefully chapters 2 and 3. But before that, I thought last week we had a lot of news. Well, the news just keeps on coming.
It's new news.
It is new, brand new, like 30 seconds old news.
Yeah.
That Wizards of the Coast has just announced a Dungeon Master's Screen Wilderness Kit. Teos and I think, find it funny that last week or in the past few weeks we've been talking about exploration a lot and how to run, wilderness encounters and what's too much, what's too little, and what are some of the pitfalls for running it. And on the heels of that, here is this wilderness kit that will be released on the 17th of November for a mere $24.95. This kit equips Dungeon Masters with a screen and other tools perfect for running D&D adventures in the wilderness. So not only will you get a gorgeous art screen on the outside, the inside will include references to wilderness rules, and it will also contain 5 dry erase sheets featuring hex maps, a food and water tracker, and rules references for wilderness chases, journeys, and actions you can take in combat. There are 27 cards for keeping track of conditions, initiative, and environmental effects, and then a box to hold those cards. That was what was announced on the website. Teos, what you thinking?
I'm just trying to think, when they finished listening to episode 3, they must have jumped immediately into production. I can't imagine. No,
I had to have it pretty quick.
It's fun when you have this convergent, right? When people, they've designed this probably a year ago, but you have this sort of, that there's that acknowledgement of like, DMs could use some help in this regard. So yeah, I'm really excited to look at this. I'm very curious to look at the back of this DM screen. The front looks amazing. It's got this beautiful snowy peak and this green dragon flying over sort of snowy peaks on one side, fading in the forest. That looks wonderful, but I'm always curious what's on the inside. What are the tables they chose to put and how? And the tables all have this special juicy information you've got to know. So how did they handle that? And I'm really curious. Can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it is, like you said, interesting that obviously the timing had nothing to do with us or anything else. And I'm sort of surprised that this wasn't around for the release of the Chult adventure, Tomb of Annihilation. But I think it makes sense because in Icewind Dale, obviously, exploration and survival is going to be a big part of that adventure, I would guess. And so having it for that may be the impetus for the release of it at this time.
Yeah, maybe it was on their minds, that concept, or maybe it was something they were going to put more in the book, or maybe there is more in the book, and it led to this. Who knows?
Yeah,
but this is cool. I think this is a neat thing, and I like DM screens both as a fashion statement, and in this case, this is cool to be able to like swap out to your wilderness exploration screen. And I also like them just as a reminder to the table that you are the DM. That sounds funny, but it's like wearing a suit and tie to certain work things. Like I don't really care to do that, but it really makes a difference with how people react to you. And I find when I'm running at cons, DM screens make that kind of a difference.
Yeah, it is funny to think about that. If you're at a convention where there's hundreds of tables, and you say are in charge of walking around and picking up tickets or telling something to the DMs. That is the one big clue. And I don't use one, but I generally stand while I DM.
Yeah.
So I'm usually the one person standing at the table, which is a clue.
That's a great practice, standing at the table. And like if I had to, if you forced me, right, like at gunpoint, choose the best DMs in this room, like you could not do poorly by just choosing the ones that are standing.
Well, I will. Well, the problem is I just can't see over the table. I have to stand. It has nothing to do with anything other than
that's hilarious. I love it.
That height.
Yeah. See over the table.
Yep. So we will standing on a chair.
Yeah. So that'll be a future product, which will be a step stool for shorter DMs.
That's right.
Wizards.
That's right.
There you
with
go.
Art. Make them look like gnome shoes. That would be cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
They could be like with like they expand, right? Like they lift you up to the height you want.
Right. And if they had any voice modulation capabilities, that would just be perfect.
Oh, yeah. The artificer's shoes of DMing. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. I think we found our next project, Teos.
Yep.
Speaking of upcoming projects, the D&D Celebration, this is just a reminder that it is September 18th through 20th, so it is still a couple weeks away, but rapidly approaching. You can go listen to panels. You can hear more about the upcoming releases, including Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Or you can celebrate the release of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden on that day by coming and playing. There will be sessions that you can sign up for at the D&D Celebration event portal. If you just go to wizards.com/D&D Celebration, you can get all that information. And all of the Wizards of the Coast proceeds from ticket sales are going to support Extra Life and the Children's Miracle Network hospitals. So if you have any questions about that and you can't get them answered online, on any other place, just hit Teos and I up on Twitter, because we will both be there running games.
Yeah, and two things I'll say is, one is if you are signed up for the D&D newsletter, and there is a link to do that on the main D&D Celebration page, which you will not miss if you go to the D&D website. On that celebration page, you can enter in your email to sign up for the newsletter, and you will apparently get a 2-hour adventure as well as a bunch of other stuff for free. So there's incentive. Right. The other thing that's probably worth saying is when you're signing up for games, the way it works is Friday is your Icewind Dale introductory adventure that we saw run at D&D Live and at Gen Con. It's an awesome adventure. Some guy named Sean Merwin wrote it. Then on Saturday, it's all about the epic. So if you've ever wanted to see a multi-table event and see how that works, here's a way to get in on that excitement. And then Sunday is the first adventure released for AL. It's sort of a different take on an introduction that's available called The Frozen North. That also, kind of like the introductory adventure, has short adventures that you can play one or more of. And that's a lot of fun.
Yep. So, go sign up if you're interested. If you've never played online before and you're interested in seeing how it works, go give it a shot. What's the worst thing that could happen, right?
Yeah, and the other thing I've heard, which I think they're trying to resolve, is that if you sign up for a table that seems to be open and it gives you an error message, that meant it's full, try another table. Apparently the way they are doing this is manually. So when it fills up, then they manually kind of hide it. So it's not an automated thing, but it'll give you that error message to prevent you from going further. So you won't run into any trouble. You just go back and choose a different table.
Cool. Thank you. I did not know that. So I will pass that information along via Twitter or other forms of media if I see that problem pop up.
So Shawn, I see your new job posting is up.
Oh, my goodness. So last week we talked about the job opening of vice president of D&D, which we thought, was really cool. And boy, wouldn't it be great if, but, life. And then I just happened to be strolling through Twitter and I saw the announcement that they are hiring not just a vice president of D&D, but also a senior game designer and a senior editor for D&D. Every once in a while, you'll see a job posting come up for D&D. And it's like, oh, that's cool. On a rare occasion, you will see 2 job openings and be like, hey, 2 job openings. but 3 job openings, I don't know if I've ever seen that. And that's awesome. Now, if you are in the business field, in the game design field, in the editing field, and you've got some experience, there is no better time than now to go. And the link to that is boards.greenhouse.io/Wizards of the Coast. We'll have a link in the show notes as well. So just even if you're just interested in what does it take to become a professional, game designer, editor / VP, you can go to that site and just give it a look.
Yeah.
And when I posted about it on Twitter, I got a lot of, well, what's wrong with the company because there's all of this happening. And I know that there's a lot of negativity out there in the RPG world toward Wizards of the Coast simply because they are Wizards of the Coast. There's not anything wrong, I don't think. I think one is probably replacing Kate Welsh. That would be the senior game designer.
Right.
VP of D&D, that was probably the position that Nathan Stewart was in, and he was moved into a different position, so that's probably that. And then the senior editor, they've been using freelance editors for probably 10 years now, mostly freelance editors. So they're probably just going to bring an editor in-house rather than relying so much on freelancers.
Which to me, that's the most interesting one. And I haven't really seen folks talk about this on Twitter, but to me, that's the one that's super interesting because Wizards used to have an editorial department that served it. And some of the people were dual job, like they did editing and they did game design and, various pieces. Right. It wasn't like it was just a bunch of people sitting around editing. But you had, folks like Jeremy Crawford, and then you had a whole bunch of people, several people that were in the job of editing. They still use freelancers, but it was mostly done in-house. And that really got closed down.
Yeah.
Turned into freelance only. And so bringing back in a senior editor, maybe that's about freeing someone like Jeremy up more, but it represents a change here. But as you said, it's really hard for outsiders to know what all of this entails. At a small RPG company, you can count the 4 people and sort of say like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. Maybe get some intelligence. But in this case, I know through friends that Wizards of the Coast has done a transition to be more of a studio-oriented shop. A couple of years ago, they started this process. And so that means that you sort of replicate things and create a sort of little incubator for your product line. And you have one of everything. So you have your own kind of graphic designer and you have your own editor and so on. And so just that alone can create shifts that are completely based on what the corporation Wizards of the Coast is doing. That is not based on what D&D is doing.
Correct.
And then we can misinterpret that and think, oh, it means X, but it doesn't have to, right?
Right.
So that's just the kind of things that happen at a larger company like that. Some folks might mention Hasbro, but Hasbro is very independent from Wizards of the Coast, so I don't think that tends to have much of an impact at all.
True. And there's also a misunderstanding about what it means by editor, right? There are different levels of editing, and you can have your basic proofreader, copy editor, that they're not making any major decisions. They're fixing typos. Then you have sort of your general baseline editor who looks at it in terms of how it fits with the rules. Or if it's an adventure, maybe how the adventure flows. So they're going kind of one level deeper to interact more with the designer on making sure that the product, not only everything's spelled right, everything looks right, but it fits into the overall scope of what the product is trying to do. And then you have someone who is kind of like an executive editor, almost like a producer level, where they have their fingers in many different aspects of the project, not just the text, right? So they may be dealing with art as well. They may be dealing with playtesting as well. This may just be a move from where they might have had producers in the past. They may now just be calling that role more senior editor.
It could
You
be.
just-
That's smart.
it's yeah.
There's a
it's
lot
hard to
here
know.
in the job description that says things like managing freelance staff, commissioning them. Those are things that producers typically did.
Mhm.
It also talks about marketing copy and cover text. And so what it may be is a really smart strategy of trying to say, like, let's make our products and our sort of tasks, jobs, projects align better and have a common language, have a more streamlined view at what the words are, right? The words should align. They should all reflect what we're saying on the marketing side. Our freelancers are lockstep with that. Our schedule's all working with it. So, there can be a lot here, and it's hard to know how it'll play out over time.
Very true. So that's our take on all those job openings. We wanted to talk really briefly about this final subclass that they put up for the Unearthed Arcana article and then the survey that followed. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the College of Spirits. I wanted to run down quickly through the Undead patron for Warlocks. So the Undead as a patron is an entity that resides in the dark corners of the multiverse. So they talk about Acererak or Azalin or Lord Soth or Strahd or some other ancient and powerful undead being. They are the one that gives you your powers. So what does this entail? Well, first is the expanded spell list that basically touches on all the usual suspects for this sort of necromantic thing. So you got your false life, you've got your blindness, you've got your death ward, things like that. For first level, you get an ability called Form of Dread. And I found this very interesting. So as a bonus action, you can transform for 1 minute. While transformed, you gain these benefits. You gain temporary hit points equal to 1d10 plus your warlock level. Once during each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack, you can force it to make a wisdom saving throw. And if it fails, the target is frightened of you until the end of your next turn, and you are immune to the frightened condition. And I find these sorts of things interesting, these sorts of transformations for a minute, because they can either be really cool or they can just be burdensome to me. And this, I think, falls on the cool side. The saving throw every time you hit something with an attack may be burdensome. I would want to play test it first, but I think it's simple enough that you can do it. I like it when it sort of changes the way you can play your character. Right? I love this for the people that don't want just the simple warlock. They want something that while they're in this new form, it changes the way they play their character. This doesn't quite do that, but it at least offers something different.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So essentially, it's mechanically this saving throw that you're doing when you hit someone is causing you to be frightened. So it's disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. Right. And that is heavy to be doing that constantly. It's definitely problematic for bosses, right? Like, it's not that big deal if you hit the one goblin in the room, fine. But when every round you are possibly getting this creature to be at disadvantage on all of their attacks, that could be pretty annoying. Yeah,
it's only when you hit. So that's the one thing that I think is a saving grace, and it has to be a spell or an ability that you make an attack roll for, right? If you cast some spell where they have to make a saving throw, that doesn't count as an attack.
Yeah, that's true.
So it that mitigates that a little bit, and you can do it a number of times per day equal to your proficiency bonus, and then you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest.
I do want to go back and say just really quickly that the concept I'm not super in love with, just because to me this has a very 4E feel where it's really super powery, right? Like sort of Acererak, Lord Soth, Strahd, like that's pretty powerful and dark stuff. And also, like, aren't we the heroes? Aren't we the good guys?
Yeah.
It's maybe, to me, obviously you can easily change this, but to me, story-wise, this is maybe a little too far. Like following Lord Soth, like that's a bit much to me. But I guess patrons are always pretty dark.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, right. That's the thing about warlocks, though, right? Is it is mostly dark. You have the celestial, um, which is for sure light. But all the other ones, even the Fey one,
Yeah, even Fey, you're right.
is dark. So I can forgive it that I think.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, okay.
but sure, yeah. So that's first level. At sixth level, you get grave touched. You don't need to eat, drink, or breathe. In addition, when you hit a creature with an attack and roll damage against the creature, you can replace the damage type with necrotic. And if you are in your form of dread, then you can roll an additional damage die when determining the necrotic damage that the target takes. Okay. This is like I was saying, I like this, but this is a very personal thing. I like things like I just said that sort of change the way you play your character. So when you're in this form, everything you do is different. It's sort of like the barbarian rage, right? You're hitting. Then when you go into this rage, you get these abilities. This is along those lines, maybe a bit more complicated, but still sort of this switch that you turn on that changes the way you play your character.
Yeah, it can certainly be very strong, and as you said, a lot depends what the particular situation. But in an adventuring day where you have 3 or 4 combats, depending on your level and your proficiency bonus, you can have this transformation for all of your battles, right?
Yeah.
3 combat day, you're always going to have D10 plus warlock level and hit points and temporary hit points. You're always going to be doing this attack business where you do extra damage and frighten them. That's pretty powerful. If it's a giant dungeon, then less so.
Right. And that was the thing I was going to say at the end of this, but you brought it up now. So it's a perfect time to talk about it, right? Is this concept of how an adventure runs? And if you are running one big deadly combat per day, that's a completely different game than if you are running 12 easy combats in one day, because both turn out to be challenging in different ways, but it changes the way the rules work, right? Because as you say, if you only are fighting 3 combats and each combat takes less than a minute, then you're always in this form. And you may as well just always be in that form. But if you are running many, many combats that each only last a round or 2, but they take place over a full day, then you're only getting a chance to use this in 3 rounds or 4 or 5 rounds rather than in 10 rounds once. So it's it's an important concept to consider as you read and judge these rules.
Right.
At level
I was going to say this next one, I mean, hilarious.
Yeah. So at level 10, you get Mortal Husk. You have resistance to necrotic damage, and if you are transformed using your form of dread, you instead become immune to necrotic damage. Okay. In addition, when you are reduced to 0 hit points, you can cause your body to explode. I always love it when my body explodes. Each creature within 30 feet of you takes necrotic damage equal to 2d10 plus your warlock level, and then you are revived with one hit point in your previous space along with your gear, and you gain 1 level of exhaustion. Once you revive this way, you can't do so again until you finish 1d4 long rests. That 1d4 long rests, I'm like, okay, I could tweak this, I could tweak that, going down through the list, and then I get to the 1d4 long rests, and I hear the brakes screech as I hear that. I like the idea that maybe this is so powerful that we can't refresh it after every long rest. I don't know that rolling a die for long rests is manageable at the table. I can barely remember, what my players or what my character did the last combat, much less. Oh wait, was it 3 long rests that we had to wait for how many long rests have we taken since then? If you don't take a long rest, but maybe every 3 sessions because you run short sessions, now you're talking about 12 sessions to remember back. It's not.
I'm not in love with this
thing.
one. I mean,
Yeah.
I like the concept of sort of being able to explode, but there's a lot here that so you can cause your body to explode. You don't have to. So that's where you sit down and you look at, okay, I just hit 0 hit points. Do I want to inflict damage on whatever's within 30 feet? Oh, how many allies, how many enemies?
Right, that's your friends, right.
But then I get to come back with a hit point, but I'm going to have a level of exhaustion to be at disadvantage on all my ability checks. It's kind of a lot. I just see the game slowing down instead of it being like an epic moment. And then you've got to figure out your D4 long rests on top of all of it.
Right. And any ability that spell, ability, attack, whatever, that has a chance to damage your allies, you're automatically causing problems at the table, even if you have a bunch of people who are cool with each other, because then it becomes a tactical thing. Well, I'm only at 7 hit points, so you're probably going to kill me, even though you'll be alive. But wait, I'm useless in this fight, so go ahead and do it. Versus, no, wait, I'm the cleric, and I can get you up, so don't do it, and then I will just heal you next round. All that slows things down, as you said.
Yeah, it needs a pass, and it needs I think, there's something here that needs to change. Maybe all of it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that if it gets the feedback that we're giving it, then it will either get a big redesign or get dropped completely. And at level 14, your capstone is spirit projection. As an action, you can project your spirit from your body. The body you leave behind is unconscious and in a state of suspended animation. Your spirit can remain outside your body for up to 1 hour or until your concentration is broken, as if concentrating on a spell. When your projection ends, your spirit returns to your body, or your body magically teleports to your spirit space, your choice. While projecting your spirit, you gain the following benefits. Your spirit and your body gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. When you cast a spell of conjuration or necromancy, it doesn't require verbal, somatic, or material components that lack a gold cost. And you have a flying speed equal to your walking speed, and you can hover. You can move through creatures and objects as if they were difficult terrain, but you take 1d10 force damage if you end your turn inside a creature or an object. And if you are using your form of dread, once during each of your turns, you can deal necrotic damage to a creature. You regain hit points equal to half the amount of the necrotic damage you dealt.
Yeah.
Again, so much to unpack here. It's flawed right at the start. It's flawed just from the start because you are separating your body from your spirit. So now there are 2 things. Now, if a fireball goes off, does it hurt your body and your spirit? Or just one? Because you're taking double damage. Otherwise, even though you are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, you're still, are you splitting your hit points or are they the same? You know what? Does what I'm saying make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that whole, or you have to stash your body. Right. So you either have to put your body in a closet and you've got an hour to roam around, but then you're going to have to snap back to it or bring I guess your body can come to you, which is good. But it's a little like, this to me feels very AD&D, like especially 2D.
Yep.
There would be sort of things like this where it sounds really fun and then you try to use it in play.
Right.
And it would be so hard to like, guys, I want to, stash my body somewhere. No, come on. We got to, we don't know if we'll have an hour. You end up arguing about it and you don't use the power.
Right.
Yeah, I would not. I think like you said, the splitting your body just is going to it's going to make it hard to use this.
And if your body's unconscious, any attacks against it are critical hits.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, okay, yeah, your spirit's wandering around while the dragon is chewing on your unconscious body. That's probably not good.
Yeah, it is powerful otherwise, but it's just that mitigating that body separation, I think, would make this hard in everyday play. Yep. And yet it's your capstone, so you want to do this, right?
Right, exactly. This is the cool thing that you waited 14 levels to do. So
how often can you do this?
Let's see. as an action. I'm not sure. I copied over. I didn't copy over all the text, so I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, just take on.
You can once per long rest, basically.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously going to get changed. So
I think so.
I don't have a lot.
Yeah.
I think they probably just threw it out to see, get feedback, get people's thoughts on it, which is fine. It's a totally fine way to design. It's just you have to be ready to take the criticism that we're giving it.
Yeah, but this is an interesting one for sure. This Warlock Pact is a hard one,
Yeah.
and I think that's the idea is neat, and that how can you really steep a warlock in their patronage to this extent where they take on the form of that patron,
Right.
and a really strong. Again, we said last time, this is necrotic, just like the other one. There's a lot of ghost necrotic type stuff. So does that signal something coming out in that vein? Who knows?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they reissued Strahd, so
It's true.
who knows? Okay. And hey, you were on Adventurers Wanted, covering codes of conduct. Yeah. How'd it go?
It was great. They are so nice. Maat, Amy, we had a great time talking about codes of conduct in general, the kind that you use at conventions, and then also the product that I wrote, the free product, Code of Conduct for RPG Projects. We talked about that as well and answered many questions that had come in beforehand. So things like, how do you go about designing one, and can you use someone else's code, and just a lot of interesting concepts. So I do encourage folks to listen to it. I think hopefully it's an important listen around how our hobby is changing in this regard.
Yep. And that's one of the things that we've considered talking about on this show in the past, and we'll continue to consider it. And so the code of conduct that you wrote that's up for free on the DM's Guild is one for companies, correct?
Yeah, and it's on drive-through, and it's not necessarily just a company, but it can be. It's on drive-through and it's on itch, and it's free. You can redistribute it as long as you credit. And the whole idea is take this code of conduct and use it on your project, making any changes you want to it, but you're ready to go, or you can edit it. And what it's supposed to do is guide a group that's working together, right? One or more than one creator working together to say, hey, here's what we're saying is expected behavior on this project. And then we also talked about things like the Herald's Guild and Baldwin Games, how they have a code of conduct which says, hey, if you're a DM or if you're a player, here are the expectations for you. If you're a gaming store, right? Those kinds of codes of conduct.
Yeah. And if you do want official support for your convention show from the Adventurers League, you do need to have a code of conduct approved by them. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, and the Adventurers League has a number of resources and examples of codes of conduct that they provided when they made that change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. All right. So that was the news. Now we want to get to our main topic today, which is our continuing look at Mythic Odysseys of Theros. This will be part 2. In the previous part, we talked about the new races, your backstory, the heroic drive, the subclasses, the athlete background, and we talked about the general tenor of the book, the importance of dreams and belief, and how deities and religious patrons can drive play. Now we want to delve into the gods themselves, what they bring to the game, what they would bring to a Theros campaign specifically in terms of what they mean to characters. So do you want to talk about this chapter?
Yeah, this is one of the meatier chapters in the book. I think really chapter 2 and 3 are both very meaty, a lot of information. And this really does take on each of the gods that they have here. 15, is that the total? Yeah. And they, if you're familiar with sort of the Greek pantheon, this certainly reflects that kind of thought with a few changes. But you have a whole bunch of really interesting gods that are brought to life even more so by having the incredible art that comes from the Magic the Gathering side. So just, It's a beautiful look at these 15 gods. Each one gets a nice level of detail. I think it's something like 2.5 pages for each of the gods. And it will talk about their sphere of influence, their goals, and the divine relationships they have, sort of who they get along with, who they're contrarian with, what it's like to worship that god. And then it goes into details about the champions. And if you are so basically a character, if you're a character that follows this god, what does that mean? And it has a bunch of information on that.
Yeah. And in addition to sort of that background character building information, they have a mechanic that is definitely mechanical in nature as opposed to narrative in nature. And that's the piety mechanic. You want to touch on that briefly?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really cool idea, right? Because when you're trying to create a book like this, a setting book, you want to say, well, what can I do that mechanically will drive and encourage play so that this all matters, right? So the important parts of the setting matters. And gods are one of the super important parts of the Theros setting. So this mechanic is meant to reinforce that and drive a continual relationship between the players, their characters, and the gods. So you start with a score of 1. And anytime you do something that advances your deity's interests or follows their ideals, gives you +1 to your piety score. And so I think that's generally meant to happen like, actually it does say this, it says, and I'll quote it, as a general rule, you can expect to increase your piety by 1 during most sessions of play, assuming you're following your god's tenets. So that's really cool in terms of this drive. We'll talk about what that means in a second, but I want to pause here and say, hello, old school, with this piece that says, if you change gods, you restart. And this is something that came up in AD&D type play that we haven't seen in a while, right? My paladin, my lawful good paladin did something wrong, tortured a prisoner, something terrible like that. You lose,
right,
your paladinhood, right?
You're basically now you're now a fighter. Congratulations.
Exactly.
And not only that, you're a pretty weak fighter.
Yeah. So this, you could have a piety score of 30, and if you decide for whatever reason to change gods, you no longer follow Malgus, the god of slaughter, because you saw that was a bad idea. You're at piety 1, which is like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again, mechanics telling us how wizards think the game should be played is something that's, as designers, we always look at.
Yeah.
So it tells you're supposed to get about 1 point per session generally. And then at certain levels, you gain benefits. So the first level is level 3. So when you get 3 piety, you get an ability, a feature, right? And then at 10 points. Okay, so if you get 1 per session, that's 3 sessions and then 7 more sessions. Then at 25, you get the 3rd step in this ability. And then at 50, you get the 4th. And so if you can equate those to the tiers of play, you don't have to, but you can, because there are 4 of them. So are they telling us that you should play about 3 adventures or 3 sessions, and then you should be 2nd level, or
4th level,
4th level, and then after 10 you should be about 10th level, and then after 25 you should be about 60. It's weird that those were the numbers chosen.
And why not just say tiers,
right?
But it is an interesting piece. Like, someone must have sat down and done the math on the tiers and not quite wanted to use the tiers, which is interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of a bizarre. As a designer, I want my numbers to make sense.
Yeah.
Right. I want there to be a reason behind them. So those numbers just kind of pop up there.
The other thing is, to me, Theros is a campaign I would want to play more like Shadow of the Demon Lord, like, quick advancement, epic kind of stuff. And 50 sessions is a long shot for most people playing a Theros campaign, I think.
Yeah.
But isn't the whole point to be kind of godly? So, adjust to taste. The DM can easily change this, right? It's not 50, it's 35 or whatever,
Right. Or it's 1 per level, and it's after 2, 9, 15 and 18 or whatever. And as long as they do something while they're that level to advance their gods, wants and desires, then they get it. But what do they get?
Tell them
you may
what they
be
get.
asking.
Yeah.
Tell them what they've won.
So one of the things it's very interesting is what they get really varies. To me, this design, it's not like they're not balanced, but that they aren't equal, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they're wildly inconsistent, but it feels to me like design that first and foremost is going for what the deity would give, and then secondly is trying to be balanced. But as an example, let's just take, Theros, the death god. So piety 3, your life is intertwined with the fate of the dead. You can cast gentle repose without material components, number of times equal to your wisdom modifier. Okay, cool, that's fine. It's it's a lot of story aspect there. 10 plus, you can cast Speak with Dead, requiring no material components. Can do so once per long rest. Then at level 25, you can cast False Life, no material components. You gain 25 temporary hit points when you use it. And you can do that once per long rest. Pretty strong, pretty good. Then Champion, when you're piety level 50, you can increase your intelligence or wisdom score by 2, and you can also increase your maximum for that score by 2. So you can go beyond the normal, maximums of the game. That's pretty sweet. Yep. But there are some that are really, really strong, like Erebos in the level 25. That was a really tasty one. That is, when a soul is sent to its right place, you can draw on the energy of the underworld to empower you. Creature within 10 feet dies. Use your reaction, gain temporary hit points equal to your level. And you can just do that all the time.
Yep. That's
it really varies.
Yeah, I mean, if it said an ally, that's right, that's rare. But a creature, I mean, that's happening like every round.
Endless temps all the time, baby, right? And so that is, and then there's some like Clothis is just a really cool god of fate, super awesome in all the ways. And you get the spell Command as your level 3. So, no gentle repose for you. You're commanding people a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier.
Right.
That's a stronger thing.
For sure. I mean, so again, when you add new abilities, and especially new abilities that don't jive with the regular progression of a character from the base rules, you're just adding complications to this machine that is this game. There are just more gears with which to either break in terms of falling apart, or break in terms of overpowering when you start combining it with other things.
Though honestly, I love this. So yes, that's totally true. But I think that's what makes this, to me, really compelling. I mean, I like the story. I like the overall story of Theros. But to me as a DM, what excites me about this is, I could run a fast and furious, not as in the movies, but fast.
Well, kind of like the movies.
I guess. Yeah, like we're all super beefy, crazy, good at what we do, and we're gaining piety left and right. And we, go ahead, increase your int score. Go ahead, get temporary hit points every combat. And I'm going to throw mythic monsters at you. Like, let's make it Clash of the Titans, right? And let's have it go bap, 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 bap as we play, like fast and furious. I think that's what's neat. And I kind of wish that they maybe had gone a little further by saying just level up every time you play. And that piety should be, like you said, kind of based at certain levels so that it's faster.
Yeah.
And just dive into it.
Yep. And I think in that sense, it does work, right? Because a lot of it then depends on what sort of adventures that you're going to run, what sort of campaign you're going to run, like you said. And we will get to that at some point, talking about, creating adventures in Theros. But for now, we are going to move. Is there anything else you want to say about the gods before we moved on to the realms?
Only that this is really very well done. You get the information you want for each of these gods to make them feel fleshed out, to make them tangible. It's written with an eye towards how you use them in play, and that's really cool.
Yep. Now we wanted to touch on chapter 3, which is your chapter setting, the chapter that gives you the setting in which the gods and the mortals play. One thing I want to mention about setting in role-playing games, and really in any sort of storytelling, whether it's fiction or movies, is that it is more than where the action takes place. Setting is more than that. It's more than just where the characters exist. Setting becomes a character if you are using setting correctly. It can both inform the plot. It can also drive the plot. It can basically, setting becomes the plot if the setting is intriguing enough. So when I look at any sort of new setting, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at not just what is it, but how are we going to use it?
That's really good. So now I want to know what you took away from this.
Well, that's hopefully what we're going to get at. So there are 3 realms. There's the mortal world, which they go into detail on each of the 3 city-states, the polis. Then they talk about the realm of night, Nyx, right? The realm of the gods, the sky, where the constellations basically hold the gods in place. And then the underworld, which is sort of your, not your hell, right? Not your Avernus, but sort of your afterworld.
Yeah.
So let's start breaking these things down. Let's talk about the mortal world. You want to?
Yeah. So I think what's cool and different, a lot of times you get something like the Forgotten Realms that's so enormous that you literally see Wizards of the Coast focus on a sliver of it in the Sword Coast, right?
Right.
And this pre-bakes that in, and they just say, like, there's this really dangerous world and huge mountains that close us off, so we're just in this small coastal area.
Yep.
And we've got 3 cities, and it's hard to travel far beyond. If you travel like in the water, despite the fact these places all have navies, if you go beyond the unchartable, who knows how long ocean, you drop off the side of the world.
Yep.
It's very classical thought around what the world feels like. And that's kind of neat. What it does is it funnels you into being in a very concentrated setting that has 3 distinct cities, and then some outlying lands that tend to be your new races and where they live. And that's cool.
Yep. Yeah, it is. I like campaigns. I like campaign settings that are small, that are congregated, that are easy to navigate. And this is definitely that. And I think it's even more important to do it in this sense, because if we are going to run this mythic, this over-the-top campaign, I don't want to get trapped in the minutia of what are the politics of this one little city-state. Right? I want them to be a starting point, and then I want to get out of them into the unknown and into the place where incredibly large things are happening. So in that sense, I didn't want to read about 27 nations and 47 cities. I'm glad that it was
great point.
The point, and the fact that they basically represent these 3 city-states, basically represent 3 known quantities in the Greek world, right? One is Sparta, one is Athens, and one is the Amazon, basically.
But and it's pretty easy when you're reading, if you would all know about, if you know your history at all, this part of history, it rings true just as you read. You go, oh, okay, everybody must serve in the military. You've got this wandering bands that make up the army of Akros, and it's very militaristic, and you're like, yep, Sparta, okay, got it. But it's done, I think, in a good way. Like it's not like you roll your eyes and go, geez, here we go, it's tired. It actually, there are some really nice aspects to each of these.
Yep. Yeah, they do give they give great information, not just good information, right? This is great, concise but clear setting information. The only thing for me that's lacking, and it may come later, is what stories do I tell here? because they give you the seeds, not even the seeds, right? They give you potential stories, but like in Akros, the Sparta nation, the king died, the queen disappeared. There's rumors that the king isn't really dead, but he's been seen out there running with the centaurs, and so who's going to be the new leader? And leaders can be overthrown with trial by combat, essentially. So all of that is great, cool information. But what does it mean in the campaign I want to run?
Right.
So tell me that. I need to know that.
Yeah, you're right. It is a bit, it's a step short of giving you what you need to really run the campaign. Yeah.
And maybe it comes later. I haven't read the chapter on adventures yet, so maybe I'm just.
I think that we'll talk about that. I don't think it quite does that.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Then yay me.
You're right.
So the next section they talk about after the mortal world is Nyx.
Can I just say some quick
Yeah.
things that are fun, which you could, all these have really neat aspects, and like you said, and I didn't think this in my notes, but it's true. This is really well written. Like, it's useful.
Oh yeah.
Great words, really well done. I mean, A++ to the team that did this part. But I want to talk about Setessa a little bit, because it is a pretty neat, atypical part of a setting. We do not see this in D&D often at all, this Amazon type take. So it's a forest city that blends into surroundings and living in harmony, but it's not at all like some elven city. The population is largely women who hold most leadership and work positions. And then there are tons of children, because what happens is at age 14, when you're a man, you basically decide, and almost always will, decide to go off and find your own way in the world. So you go off and explore. Whereas women believe that become heroes through martial exploits and leadership. So they stay there and sort of hone themselves, becoming sort of stronger and stronger. It also has a number of takes on gender fluidity. It has a section where it talks about how you may choose to see yourself as a woman and then play that sort of role in the society. So you stay there and you work on these things, but then you may decide that you're male and now you go off and travel, or vice versa. And that I thought that was very interesting. So it all creates a very different feel for this city than what we've seen in settings for D&D.
True. Very true. Yep. Anything else you wanted to talk about with that mortal world? Okay. Can you talk for a minute then about Nyx?
Yeah,
the
sure.
realms of the gods.
Yeah. And actually, I will go back and say one thing, which is that these three cities are surrounded by lands that are also described. And they have these it's the land of the centaurs, the land of the leon, and all the minotaurs. Those are all really well done as well. All right, so Nyx is the realm of the gods, and what's kind of cool about this, it's an endless plane of existence that you can see in the constellations at night. So it's a little bit like your Mount Olympus type situation, but instead of just seeing it on top of this one mountain, which there is actually a Mount Hyastos in the setting too, but you're seeing it written in the stars, and the stars are kind of looking down on you as well. So it's sort of a two-way relationship. And you can get to Nyx as a champion, and this is described in later chapters, that you can access this to sort of claim things from the gods, which is kind of cool. And it has different regions. You can't map it, but it has these like Mystic Sea, the Tobian Fields of Endless Battle, some really cool regions in it as well.
Yeah, and that unmappable thing goes back to the land as well. I remember they talked about, it's almost like Avernus in the sense that it changes.
Yeah.
One time you go from one place to another and it takes you 5 days. The next time it takes 10 days. Yeah. So it's just this sort of to keep the mystery of it intact. And so could you finish up by telling us about the underworld?
So the underworld is neat in that it is a very classical view of, as you said, not hell, it's not Avernus, but where a soul goes to rest. And where you go, there are a number of different wards or regions in the underworld that are based on sort of the type of person you were when you died, where your soul goes. You were into battle, or you were a craftsman or whatever. So that you go to that appropriate ward, and the wards are all tied together by Tartix River, which is a River Styx version, of course. It's important to say in the underworld, you can reach it by magical means, but it's not actually underground. Each of the regions or wards has really cool ideas. And my favorite thing is about the returned, which is the idea that you can escape the underworld having died. But if you do so, you have to follow this path of Phenax, who was the first person to sort of escape the underworld. And when you do so, you come back without your memories. And there are a number of returned. Like, this is a thing you can find, and there are 2 cities on the map where the returned congregate in these necropolis. And they are grim, purposeless spirits. They're often haunted by trying to regain memories. Like, there are various groups of them. They're sort of grouped the returned into different categories, and there are those who are trying to regain memories and scribes that are writing down. There are these gray merchants, which are really interesting. They sell and trade things that feel like junk. They want sort of useless things and are giving useless things for them, and it's not clear why they do that. Returned mages sometimes can cast through the use of blood magic, slaying small animals and things like that to power it. Some are evil and cursed. All of it is just great adventure fodder, and in fact, the included adventure uses the returned for the concept.
Yeah, as I was reading this, I was like, oh, my campaign is just totally planned out for me, right? Because, it goes on that. At first, it's local, right? First, your heroes locally, then your heroes regionally, and then you move out into sort of the unknown. And this is laid out for you perfectly here, right? You start in one of the city states and you deal with that for the first few levels. Then, for some reason, you have to go to the underworld to do something. Then you have to make that trip back without becoming one of the returned. Then and it's all mythical, right?
Yeah,
it's all
very mythical.
This very mythical, and then you have to go into the night sky itself to fight whatever the main foe is going to be. It's a campaign that you can, just by reading the setting, sort of is laid out for you. You don't need a lot of imagination to see where it can go. Yeah.
So both of these chapters are just really beautiful. When you try to think like, should I buy this book? These, from a DM perspective, in terms of the things that inspire you, I think both these chapters do a good job of selling anyone on this book. If you go to your bookstore, go to your gaming store, and you page through, take a look at this, and I think it will call to you.
Nice. And in the next episode, we're going to try to finish up our look at Theros by looking at Chapter 4, Creating Adventures, Chapter 5, Treasure, and Chapter 6, Friends and Foes. So, anything else you wanted to say before we take off for the week, Teos?
Nope. Thank you, everyone, for the continued interaction online. It's been great to hear everybody's feedback.
Yeah, we've been getting feedback via the website, via Twitter, via the forums. So we appreciate feedback, even if you're insulting me when you do it. I appreciate it. And I want to thank all our listeners and all our patrons. If you like the show, please consider supporting us on patreon.com/MMP. If you can't, just talking about us on social media, interacting with us, that is where our lifeblood is, and we appreciate it greatly. Teos, where can people find you on the internet? You can find me at AlphaStream on Twitter. You can find me at my blog, alphastream.org, and on the Misdirected Mark forums. And you can find me on Twitter at Shawn Merwin, or go to those forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com, or you can go to the Misdirected Mark website, and each episode is up there, and you can leave your comments on a particular episode on that website. Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. So, hey, Teos, what do you think we should do now? Nilea, god of the hunt, demands that we go kill some monsters. I'll spill some wine, too.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?